Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new live stream. I feel like I haven't done this in a while, even though I have. So, hello and welcome. I'm going to wait for a few more people to shuffle in. I see more faces in the chat and more people coming in. So, as per tradition, what are you drinking? I have Earl Grey in my mug. Tell me where you're from in the chat. Tell me what you're drinking. I would love to know. And we're going to talk about App Store optimization and mistakes and how to avoid them in just a few short moments. And I see the chat started before I even came on stage. So well done, folks. Well done. Ooh, coffee. I did not have coffee this morning. I should. Ooh, UK, Argentina, Romania, international again. It's kind of late in Romania right now, no? So today I have a pretty interesting kind of live stream. Ooh, a large cup of coffee. We're not just talking no little espressos. Portugal, Turkey, Mexico. Turkey the country, not the food. Can't really put that in a cup. Pretend you didn't hear that. Okay, 5:30, not too bad. Ooh, Israel's in the house. Ireland is in the house. Oof. We're global today again. I like that. I like that. They used to say that ASO is mostly a European thing, but now you can see it coming to the US, and then you can see all the advancements going back to Europe, so it's kind of a win-win the way I see it. Kind of all over the place. Well, I mean, it makes sense. Really, the App Store is international, especially now that you can localize into right to left languages as well. Now, I'm in COVID time, so everything is slower. A few years now already. That's pretty cool, and the chat is pretty lively. So I think we can get started in maybe a minute, which is really ahead of schedule for me. Well done, everyone. Thanks for showing up on time. By the way, can everyone hear me? Am I a little bit quiet? I keep changing my my setup every time, so if I am a little bit quiet, do let me know. I'm moving my microphone a little bit closer, just in case. Quiet, loud, audio good? Cool. Perfect, great. Wow. All right. All sounds good. Oh, and Canada is in the house too. What countries are not here? I'm not gonna ask. We'll just kind of figure it out later. Oh, you're welcome. For those of you who don't know, I answer a ton of ASO questions on Twitter, also on email, on Twitter as well. And so if you have one, and I mean, you're not on the live stream, then by all means, hit me on Twitter. My Twitter name is in the description, I believe. It's not if it's going to be at the end. So wait for it. You'll find it. But you have me here today, so let's not worry even about Twitter. And yes, the person in the chat who was bringing up yesterday's conversation on Twitter, very niche, very niche. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. All of the keywords and everything else and all the scores are really meant for stuff that is a little bit more popular, but there is a way to use it. There's like a strategy to use it. We can get there when we do Q&A at the end. Ooh, Denmark? Ha! I think it might be time to get started. Usually I give it 3, 4, 5 minutes. I think we're at the 5-minute mark. So let's do it. I mean, it's not really different than what I've been doing so far, so it's going to be fine. But welcome, everyone. If you just joined, please tell us where you're from and what you are drinking right now. I got tea in my mug. And if you've been here before, you know what I do. I talk about App Store optimization. I answer questions. And I always try to make this really as hands-on as possible, meaning as easy for you to do, because a lot of people think ASO is this hard black box and the algorithm was not meant for discovery. And I hear all these wild things. And none of that is true. If you want to do it, you can do it. And so I try to take all my knowledge and experience. I've been doing this for, I don't even know how long. And I try to turn it into stuff that you can do, stuff that's actionable. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. What I'm actually going to be doing today is, a few weeks ago, I shared a guide called my list of ASO checkups. And the goal behind that was to take really everything that I've seen up until now, all the mistakes that people make, and turn them into a very simple, very easy list of checks to go through. So when you look at your own app, you can say really quickly, oh, why did I do that? Let's not do that. And I know it may sound too simple, it may sound too basic, but at the end of the day, that's the list I use when I talk to people that I either work with on the ASO side or try to help with on the ASO side. I talk to hundreds of members all the time, and I get emails and I get tweets and I get a lot of questions about this, and that's really my go-to. So I look at 4 different things. I shared a few more in the guide, but they're really more in-depth of the 4 same things. And with the goal of, if you know these things, you can do them. You can look at your apps, and it's not just a one-time thing, right? So ASO, you try new keywords, you try new things, you try new screenshots, you try new approaches, you try new tones, and every time you do that, you can run through these checks really quickly, because they always tend to possibly end up with mistakes in them if you don't. So today I'm going to go through those really briefly, and then I'm going to go through real apps that you have submitted. I opened up submissions the last week, and I've gotten so many that I had to come up with a new way to even randomize them. We got close to 100, all great apps. I looked at most of them. Some have really obvious mistakes. Some have no mistakes at all, which is really cool. And so what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to go through my steps just so you know what I'm going to do, and you can kind of have a good understanding of what it looks like. And then we're going to go through some apps. Now, most of the all these apps I picked at random. Most of these apps I don't know. I've never seen before. I looked at them maybe once or twice for this specifically, but I didn't get in too deep. So what you're going to see today is you're going to see how I do it kind of in real time. And so when you see, hopefully, how easy it is for me to do, hopefully you can do the same thing. And sure, I've done this many times, so I know what I'm doing. So it may take you a little bit more time. But I'm going to do something in minutes that could change really the trend of these apps. So if you can do it in an hour or in a day, you're probably doing well. So that's the way I see it. Let's get started with something really, really easy. I'm going to look at let's look at the guide first. So let me bring my computer in. Ta-da! That's my guide. I don't know if you've seen it. If you have, great. Hopefully you read through it and you know exactly what the mistakes are that we're going to go through today. It's a fairly short read considering all the value that it packs. I'm not going to go through it in this. I'm going to summarize it even better. And if you haven't, there's a link to it in the description that you can check out later and go through and understand the checks with a little bit more depth. It's going to be, in my opinion, one of the most helpful guides I've read, or that's what people have told me, and I believe them. So I talk about the cardinal sin of ASO, and I talk about placement, and I talk about relevance, and I talk about performance, and all of those are really important things. There's also a bug that I found that is really interesting that you can get into and save yourself, hopefully, from falling into that little trap that I don't know if Apple is going to fix. This is particularly for Apple. I talk about competition. I talk about ratings. So this is really where you want to be. But before we even get into that, let's talk about, let me summarize this because that's a little bit easier. So when we look at these things, there are a few things you want to look at when you look at your App Store optimization. And the more I look at apps and the more I see what kind of mistakes apps are making, and by mistake, I mean just something that doesn't work. It's not necessarily that you're a horrible App Store optimization person. It just means that you're doing something that is not going to help the algorithm. That's what I mean by mistake. And if I had to summarize all these things, that's this. I always get this confused. This is what it would look like. And so we have keyword duplication, something that if you've read pretty much any of my teardowns, so really anything that I write about ASO, is normally the biggest mistakes that people make. And I totally get it. It kind of makes sense why you would want to duplicate a keyword, because like this is so important to my app. I want to say it twice. But the algorithm doesn't really care much for that. And then we have relevance. We're going to look at whether the keywords that you have in your app are relevant, because just because you think that they might be relevant, or just because you think they're descriptive to your app, does not mean that people actually think they're good or useful, and the algorithm is not necessarily going to even find them. And then we're going to look at popularity, because ultimately, even if you don't duplicate and you use relevant keywords, they might be the kind of keywords no one is searching for. And I did mention before in the pre-intro that I have a strategy for what to do with keywords that are when all of your keywords are not popular. So we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Hopefully one of the apps will give us this sort of need. But if not, I'll talk about it at the end. Remind me if I don't. And lastly, performance. So the last few teardowns that I've done all talked about performance and how important performance is. And when I say performance, I mean new ratings. The algorithm is really hell-bent on understanding what people think about your app by looking at how they rate it. So if you ask for a rating and you get a rating, great. If you don't ask for a rating and don't get a rating, it's going to seem like you're irrelevant to the algorithm. So you have to change that. And I gave a bazillion ways to do that and a bazillion reasons to do that. Yet people still tell me that I'm wrong. So hopefully we'll look at a few things today that will show you how important this is. But when I do any sort of check on any sort of app or game or anything like that, those are really the first things that I look at. You don't even have to go in super deep. You can just look at it at a glance. And that's what I'm going to do today, because otherwise I'll never get through more than 2 apps. And that could be useful in and of itself to give you a good starting point, especially if you've not done ASO before and you're just getting into it, or you're taking over an app that hasn't done that in a long time. And these things change all the time. The algorithm changes, the competition changes. And so you really have to remember that if you do it once, it's probably not going to last forever. Nay, it's not going to last forever. I can tell you that right now. So how often you need to do it really depends on where your app is and what your competition is doing. But ultimately, that's what it's all about. This is iterative, and you have to continue. So if you have an easy set of checks for every iteration to make sure you didn't do anything silly, doesn't that make life easier? That's my goal, at least, or that's my point. That's how I do things. So that's pretty much what we're going to do today. Let me bring back my computer, and we will take a look at some of the apps that came up that were chosen at random. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and go through exactly those 4 things, and we'll do it right inside of the App Store page. It turns out that all the apps, or most of the apps that were submitted, were iOS apps. iOS, Mac, iPad, all those. There were a few Google apps, but they didn't end up making it into the random selection. And I did want to do some Google Play apps. So maybe in the future, I will do one just for Google so we don't end up in this situation. But I didn't want to ruin the randomness, because that would make life very difficult. So we're going to look at a lot of Apple today. If you have questions about Google Play, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. I can answer all of them right now, unless you want to talk about the Amazon App Store. I don't really do that. But in any case, the first one that came up at random is this one. I don't really know how to read this one. And this one is pretty interesting, but this one has a bunch of mistakes. Not necessarily the obvious one. So if you look at this, there's no duplication here that I can see. Maybe there's duplication in the keyword list, but there's no duplication, obviously. Walk and walking, a question that I get all the time, are not duplicates. Walks and walk would be duplicates, so the plural and the singular, but anything else, the algorithm doesn't really see. Now, I've seen the algorithm try to improve over the years and try to do a little bit better with these sort of things. So if you have seen something that indicates that it is, it's probably really, really, really tiny scale, or not even scale, but in general, it doesn't. So no duplication. Great. Relevance. What is relevant here? What does this app do? Walking workouts, outdoor walk challenges. I don't entirely understand what this means, nor do I understand what this name is. So it might be relevant for the app itself. This app is about walking workouts, which is a thing I did not really think to look for in an app. But is that what people are looking for? So when I say relevance, I don't necessarily mean relevance for features. I mean relevance for users, for the algorithm. Do they know that walking workouts is something they need to be searching for? And that's really the main key. And when people tell me that their ASO doesn't work, it's usually because they target these keywords that they think are really, really, really good, really relevant, but are not really relevant. And that's my problem. So that's the problem, not my problem. That's the problem with a lot of apps. So you target the wrong keywords, or you target keywords that you think make sense and they don't make sense. And that's really what it is. Yeah, I agree with the comment in the chat that this is supposed to be read meander. I'm not sure why, but one of those, it's again one of those things where when you develop the app, you have all these thoughts and they make a lot of sense. But when I'm as a reader, and I might be a little bit more critical than what most people will tell you, but I, as a reader, don't necessarily get it. And I think when people don't get things, they just move on. They continue on. So in this case, and the icon is not really something that fits into these checks. That's for maybe a totally different thing. As are the screenshots. And I've looked at a bunch of screenshots this morning, and I really want to do a teardown just for screenshots. So if you want to see that sort of live stream where you submit your app and I tell you everything I think about your screenshots, please let me know. So that's totally different. But in any case, you have this, and now you have walking workouts, you have walk challenges. Now, they might sound like relevant keywords, but let's look at popularity, and we're diving into number 3. So I have Keyword Inspector open, and I zoomed it in a bunch, so these overlays don't look good. Now I know that. And let me type in walking workouts. So if I had to guess, I would say maybe this sounds great. Oh, never mind. But then again, popularity of 5. So what's happening now is, let's go back to this app. Walking workouts, which is the keyword that this app is targeting, is a popularity of 5. 5 means that no one is searching for, or very few people are searching for it. And maybe it's worth taking a moment to talk about popularity. Popularity is a number from 1, but really from 5 all the way to 100, where 100 is always going to be the app with the most searches, or the keyword with the most searches. Something like Instagram or Amazon or any of those, they get really the lion's share of searches, and everything else is in relationship to those keywords. They get the most searches. And that number is done by Apple. So we know that it's real. We know that it makes sense. We know that it's real for the App Store in this case. And that's why we want to rely on it and always look for the highest one. Now, the highest one is also, we'll talk about that in performance, as if I planned this, but the highest one should not be a 5, should be more than a 5. So keep that in mind. If you remember from really all of the teardowns that I've done before, when you look at the name, the subtitle, and the keyword list, that's exactly how they're ranked. The algorithm reads the name first and likes it the most, then the subtitle, and then the keyword list. So if something is in your name, you're indicating to the algorithm that this is the most important thing. If you know one thing about this app, it's this. And when this is a 5, you know that's not good. So if Meander is in the audience, I think that would be step number 1. And I have many, many guides on how to find better keywords, how to find more relevant keywords. I think my last teardown from Tuesday actually went into that in a little bit more detail with kind of my 2 steps, my 2-step approach for doing that. So that's really where I would start. And then we don't even need to look at performance at this point, because this is a keyword with a popularity of 5. It doesn't really matter what happens in this keyword. I would swap it and then continue. Oh, hi, Gary. Gary's in the audience. Well, hopefully I helped you. So if you do end up finding a keyword that makes more sense and you use it, I would love to hear how that goes. So that's the first one from from this list. There's a question from the audience. So let's see if I can bring up comments easily. Let's do this. Aha, it worked. It doesn't look good, but it worked. So is it even worth trying to rank on a keyword score at 5? The answer is, I would say 9 point, a whole bunch of 9s times out of 10, no. Because 5 says basically the fewest number of people could be looking at this keyword. So why would you go after something like this? It feels good, and in most cases you can do it very easily because the algorithm doesn't really have a lot of signals to process. So you give it exactly what you know it wants, meaning keyword in the name in this case, and you're most likely going to be the top result. But as we see here, actually that is not true, but this is in the US, and I think the app that I was looking at is in the UK. So really what it is if you can find keywords that are more than 5, you should at least try to aim for them. Even if we're talking an 11 or 19. Ideally, you would want in the 30s, a little bit more than that to see some meaningful traction. But, and here's the thing, so that's what I was trying to get it to push towards the Q&A at the end. But when you are in a situation where you just can't find any keywords that fit your app that are more than a 5, you can optimize, and you should optimize for those 5s, but optimize for all the 5s. So find as many 5s as possible that you can target and optimize for as many of them as possible. And it shouldn't be too difficult because usually in the case of a 5, just a little bit will give you a huge boost. So you put the right keyword in the name and it combines well with the subtitle, and you put more keywords in the keyword list. And the idea is that you can get a lot of people through 1 or 2 keywords, but you can get a whole bunch of people through a whole bunch of keywords. So that's kind of what this does. And that's the idea. The idea is that you try to think about how many people can you target with these keywords, and as you do, that's what's going to happen. So that's what I was trying to get at before, and now we have this answer, which is pretty good. Okay, so actually, I didn't even want to continue on this, but this makes such perfect sense. So I was going to bring this up because I think the next app has this sort of issue, but sometimes what I was saying before about relevance is it might not be relevant for a person to think about a working workout because, like Carlos is saying, you might want to say something that has to do with an intent they have. They want to lose weight. They can walk and lose weight? What? Of course they'll do that, but they may not know that's even possible, so they may not seek out an app for walking workouts. That's where stuff gets really fun and really interesting when you think about the intent and you zoom out and you say, why would they use my app? Not what does the app do? Why would anyone need my app? And I mean, I went through a lot of this with App Figures. In the beginning, App Figures was what it did. And over the years, our marketing changed to become what you get out of it. And there's still places that you might call me out on it and say you're advertising features. And that's true because it's so intuitive, I think, for anyone who makes stuff to advertise features, but you have to think about what those features are used for. So that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Carlos. I think we'll see more of this as we continue today. So let's continue today, and let's see what else we have here. So Meander, we talked about. Next one is Yellow Courier. Find available courier jobs. I think we landed right into where I wanted to be. So a lot of stuff is interesting here, but let's go through the list. So number 1, duplication. Yes, there's already duplication. In the grand scheme of things, this is not the biggest of issues here. So not a huge deal, but it is a huge deal because, again, this is a process. And if you go through it, one process, one step at a time, you'll always be able to go through this consistently. So here's what's happening here. The algorithm is reading this from left to right. So yellow, courier, find available courier jobs. It ignores this one. And because it ignores this one, if you're in what I said before, this one gets more weight. Now you're devaluing this keyword altogether. So if you have duplication in your app, really consider removing the duplicates, and I would do the removal based on the importance. If this keyword is really important, leave it in the name. If it isn't, leave it in the subtitle. It's really either of those two. Now, if you were thinking, what about my keyword list? Keyword list gets jumbled into this as well by the algorithm. So there should not be one keyword that is repeated more than once in any of your metadata. And that's something that I changed my mind on earlier this year, if you've been following along, because I believe it's changed. Or I believe enough things changed that now it's no longer a good strategy to repeat something into your keyword list, something that I even said to do for the last few years. So we know that iOS 15 brought a bunch of interesting modifications to how the algorithm works, how the App Store works. We saw it with in-app events. We saw it with featured in-app purchases in a previous release. So we know that Apple is doing stuff to make the algorithm a little bit better. And the last thing they did was, or one of the last few things they did was to put more weight on the keyword list. And so it's useful now, a little bit more useful than it was before, but it does trip up a lot of developers. And that's why if you look at a list of apps, at a bunch of app results, and some may not make sense because they seem to be doing everything right and they're still not in the top, that's most likely why. And that's because a bunch of developers do not change their keyword list very often, not as often as they change their name or their subtitle. And that's because for some odd reason, the keyword list is not in the same place when you edit it in App Store Connect. I don't understand why. If someone from Apple's in the crowd, please let me know. But I don't know if I'm going to get an answer to this. And it doesn't really matter. This is a UX issue and not something that we're going to look at today. So back to the steps. So step number 1, we do have duplication. We want to get rid of the duplication. Step number 2 is relevance again. So I read this. Read and ride. Read and write is right. I read this, and unless I'm looking for this brand, because I imagine this is a brand, I'm not familiar with it personally, but that's what I imagine, that's really all I see. So if I'm looking for a career job, I may not, from search, I'm not going to see it. I don't know if someone is going to look for a career job on the App Store, so that's a whole other story and something we can think of, but I would actually use the name to leverage it a little bit better to explain what the app does just in case. And that's relevance. And then popularity, it kind of feels to me like there aren't a lot of options here because this is a branded app. This is an app that does something very specific, and you can't really try to aim for something else, at which point either you aim for all the 5s, as I was saying before, or you try to look for something that people want. So make money without a schedule. I don't know if that's what couriers do. I'm sorry in advance. Or find ways, like Carlos was suggesting before, a reading or a walking exercise app is really a way to lose weight. The more you think about it this way, the more you see that that sort of way to promote will also give you more popularity. And as you get more popularity, that's where things become more interesting. There's a question, an interesting question in the crowd about the developer name. So that's something that comes up not too often for me, but it does come up. So let's talk about it quickly. Here we have a developer name that's the brand name, which kind of makes sense. And in most cases, you'll see the developer name, publisher name also be the brand name. But then if you look back far enough, meaning if you find apps that have been around for very long, like old calculators or old calendars or old weather apps, you'll see that a lot of them pack a ton of keywords into the developer name. So their developer name has to be a company. Back in the day, way back in the day, it was very easy to use DBA, a doing business as here in the US, to start a company and then use that on the Apple side. And that changed at some point, and Apple took that away because people were gaming it. At the same time, over time, they also devalued what keywords from the developer name are actually worth. So they are worth something. If you have a good keyword in your developer name, great. They're not worth a lot at this point just because it's so gameable. Now, I say it's so easy to game, but really it's harder to game than any of the other stuff on this list. So take that with a grain of salt. I think from the Apple perspective, it's a lot easier to game, or it's gameable, whereas now everything is. So if you have something in your developer name that kind of fits, great. If you don't, I would not waste too much time trying to make it fit. So I wouldn't really worry about that too much. I would just kind of not worry about the developer name and worry about the app's name, the subtitle, and now a little bit more the keyword list. And there is a follow-up question. If your name has one of your keywords in it, do you need to consider that for duplication? So that is another good question. And I have done a keyword teardown. This is a while ago, maybe an app teardown, I think, on the weather channel. And the weather channel uses something like this because they're the weather channel and they're also a weather app. And they had it twice in the name in a way that I think made some sense. And I'm not sure why this is cut off. But in any case, they made it in a way that kind of made sense. If it doesn't repeat enough times, then if it repeats within the name, you're still technically getting the same value. Ideal? Absolutely not. Doable, useful, good for maybe the brand side of things? Probably. And the real challenge with that is with these big brands, sometimes you have to appease people who may not understand the importance of the name or may not understand the importance of ASO on this app and organic discovery. And I've talked to a bunch of companies who really, some people in the organization really wanted to make a change, and the higher ups just did not allow it for branding reasons. Nothing to do with technical stuff, nothing to do with the app, nothing to do with apps in general, which to me is a little bit strange, but that doesn't really matter. So that's kind of why you would be okay with duplicating as long as it's within the name or within the subtitle, not between them, because then it's where you get to starting to lose value, and that's where I would put it. So that's pretty much it. Let's see, a follow-up question on LLC. 3 questions in a row from the same chatter. Thanks. So if the LLC name itself has a keyword, I can include it in the app's name subtitle too. I believe so, and that's what I would do. I would not rely on the developer name being strong enough to actually push you to get better ranks. If it's there, it's probably going to be okay. And that's that. A really easy question. Generally, how long should you wait to see changes based on optimization changes? And this question does not really have an exact answer because every set of competitors is a little bit different. Every area of the App Store is a little bit different. Every area of Google Play is a little bit different. Every popularity reacts a little bit differently. Normally, I wait about a week or two. And usually what would happen is you would see a change fairly quickly, at least on the App Store. Google Play is a little bit slower. Google Play is a few weeks. On the App Store, you could see changes within a few days, maybe even a week. But the thing is, you have to keep an eye on it because they might not stick. I think I see it as Apple's algorithm is a little bit more experimental. And so it likes to try new things and push new things forward. But if they don't work, it will easily take them away. And so after a few days, beyond that week, once the change happened, you might see it go down. And that's what you really don't want to do. So you want to keep that in mind. And if you see something that you went up and then down, you know that you have the potential. Something is not right. Maybe the keyword needs to be moved more towards the front. Maybe the keyword is not in the right place. Maybe you're overloading your keyword list or your subtitle or your name with keywords. And so that's really what you have to be thinking about when you do this. That's why tracking is so important. And when we introduced keyword tracking, we introduced hourly tracking because you can see the data change really, really, really quickly. And on Apple's side, it does change very quickly. So overnight, something might happen and it will give you an idea of what happened immediately. And the idea is that if it happened and you know that it happened, you can act on it. If it's a negative change, you can undo as fast as possible. You should undo as fast as possible if it's a terribly, terribly negative change. If it's a positive change, you know that you should be expecting more. You know that you can potentially rework your screenshots to have these keywords. There are a lot of different things you can do as you see the movement. And that's why we want it to be so immediate. And that's why we do what we do. But that's how I would look at it. Another question, and then we'll move to the next app. The question is, what can be the reason if my app drops for a keyword, even though I keep getting new ratings? Let's see if I cannot fix this. I don't know why it's cut off. We'll get to the cutoff stage later. So I'll read it again. What can be the reason if my app drops for a keyword, even though I keep getting new ratings and didn't change anything? And the end here, I think that's the root of all evil. So you don't really have to change anything for the algorithm to like your app more, like your app less, because all of your competitors are most likely making those changes. So if you aren't doing anything, it doesn't mean that the store itself is not moving forward or not moving in some direction. And that's usually what's happening. So Apple, like I was saying before, the algorithm tries to push more things and try new things. And if there's someone else who kind of fits the bill, they're going to give it a try. And if that try worked, your app is going to get dropped a little, or it's going to move down, or something will happen. And that's why, as I was saying very early on, this is an iterative process. Ooh, it's my mouse. Whoa, what is happening? So this is a very iterative process, and you can't really do anything once, set it and forget it, because it's really not going to get you all that far. So that's normally why things happen when you don't do anything, yet they still happen. And sometimes those could also be positive things. So if a competitor messed something up totally, for you it would be easier to go up because now they're no longer occupying that spot. But that's kind of a dream, and that rarely happens. So do not wait for a competitor to mess up in order to get everything working and in order to really kind of like win a keyword. That's the way that I would say it. And that's really kind of like the best way I have for saying it. I think I figured out how to fix this. Let's see how well this works. Not well at all, obviously. So while I try to fix this, because technical difficulties are a real thing. We'll also start looking maybe at the next app that we have. And I will worry about this later. So next up, let's see, who do we have? Ooh, next up, we have a Mac app. So Mac is interesting. This is a Mac and everything app, not just a Mac app. But the Mac is everything, and if you have looked close enough at my keyword inspector, you might see something that will work for Mac coming soon. That's in a very private beta that I'm testing right now. But what we're seeing here is pretty much the same ultimately. So Mac, iPhone, iPad are all in here, and we'll really go through the same steps. I'm going to go through the iPhone side just because, I mean, it doesn't really matter. We're looking at pretty much the same. A lot of people ask me about the Mac App Store, if the Mac App Store behaves similarly or differently to the iOS App Store. And under the hood, it's really all the same. The algorithm is the same. It does everything. It follows the same rules. But the Mac App Store in general is so much more different than the iOS App Store. Many, many, many fewer apps. Much less performance, many less ratings. Everything is different. And that's why the algorithm behaves differently, even though it follows the same rules. But this is not about the Mac App Store, so we'll talk about that later. Let's go through the list of steps again. Focused work, Pomodoro timer, study, planner, stopwatch. Study planner, one word. Stopwatch, no duplication. Well done. So no duplication is a great first step. And now relevance, focused work, Pomodoro timer. I'm not entirely sure which one is more interesting, but these two kind of feel relevant to me. Study planner, not something I would think about, but does seem like something that could come up. And a stopwatch, in my opinion, is probably the most popular out of all of these. So let's go back into Inspector and see quickly if focused work and Pomodoro timer, how different they are. So we'll come here and let's do focused work. And as that loads, all this is done in real time. So if you have access to Keyword Inspector, you can actually do this on your computers right now for your keywords or follow along with mine. And I'm looking here at the US, I'm looking at iPhone, and boy, look at what we have here. A 5. So again, this is the second instance today where the most important keyword that an app is optimizing for is not at all popular. Now, luckily, there's also this in the name. And so I'm sure that there is at least something good about this. But let's see. $28. So at least half of this is good. But the problem is, because this is the first thing on this list, in this list, this is not getting as much value as it could. So really devaluing this in order to push this forward. Now, as I'm thinking about it, I'm realizing this might be the app's name, which is so generic that I didn't really get it. And if I didn't get it, a user wouldn't get it. So what I would do is maybe swap them if we really want to have this in place. There's no duplication. There's enough room here to actually move this somewhere else. But if this is the name of the app, then that would be an easy one. So if you flip them, you're telling the algorithm, this is what I care about. So that's already good. It's a popularity of 28, which is not too high, but also not too low. I kind of like these popularities where they're like low 30s or high 20s or even somewhere in the low 40s, because those are always, you will always see opportunities there, meaning apps that kind of end up there because they optimize for something, not necessarily this one thing. And if you optimize for this one thing, you can probably get in. So that's something that you really have to think about when you do this, and that goes into relevance. So we looked at duplication, no duplication here. We looked at relevance. We found a potential issue. We looked at popularity, found another potential issue. And the one thing you also then have to keep in mind is performance. So let me show you what I mean. When we go back here for this keyword popularity of 28, let's look at the ratings. Oh boy, these ratings are not good. Oh wow, this is pretty interesting. So without getting into this far too much, this is an interesting opportunity here. So this app has the keyword right up front, and with very few ratings is able to rank. This one has it in the keyword, in the subtitle, more ratings, but it can rank. This one is in the name, a bunch of ratings, and it can rank. This is very, very, very interesting. I'm not sure what's happening here, but look at these downloads. Downloads to new ratings ratio is really ugly here. So I would say this is definitely an interesting opportunity. But one thing to keep in mind here is that look at these icons. Look at these colors. They're super bright. They're super in your face. And as you dip down, you get the slightly less, I think, more dull icons. I don't know how much of an impact this has, so we're not going to get into that now. But that's kind of the idea. So I would look at what's in the keyword list for our Pomodoro timer, and then I would swap this, and boom, and we'll see how much. And that's what I would do. That would be my next set of changes, and see how much we can get out of just those changes. And then I would look at optimizing for ratings, because obviously that's something that we can do. Oh, hey, Michael. So hopefully this is helpful. And if you do make those changes, I would love to know what is happening with this app. So that's where I would go with this timer. And I believe Michael's asking a question, so let me bring this back up. Let's see if I fix this enough. I did not fix this enough. So let's bring back the comments. And where's my right comment? Let's do this. So Michael, the developer behind the app we were just looking at, is asking, would it be a good idea to experiment moving the app's name to the subtitle in the alternative Spanish MX while keeping it in the title for English US, of course? Easy answer, I think, yes. It's not a terrible idea. I think it would work. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So if you want to be aggressive, I would say flip it. If you really want to have both in the name, that would be a step one for me, at least, because focus work doesn't really do much. And in general, that's something that I kind of feel like the less it helps a user, in the algorithm, kind of like the less you should do it in general. So that's what I would look at mostly. I would think, how can I give the algorithm and people a reason to download my app, in addition to a reason to obviously show me at the top of the search results. So you can use it in the localization and it should work. But I would do it in the English localization unless for some reason you really want focus work to be the number one. But then keep in mind, because there's not much stuff happening in focused work, you will probably rank there anyway. You wouldn't need a lot of really anything, downloads, ratings, anything like that, as long as you have it in the name. So I would say don't go too crazy with how you can test it in a way that makes sense, but instead try to test it, but be ready to undo any changes if they take away from something that you believe you want to have. So that would be my way of doing this. And we're doing all right on time. A few more minutes. And I already got through 3 apps. I set up 10 just in case, thinking I would get through 5. So let's try and get through 5 together. Next one is Stu, Anger Management Journal. Be less angry today. That sounds like fun. Who does not want to be less angry today? So here's another interesting thing that we've seen pretty much from the beginning. Anger Management Journal is something that you would want once you want an anger management journal. So if you're looking for a specific feature, great. You can find it in this app. But I don't know how many people are looking specifically for this feature versus looking for something else. I think Be Less Angry really goes in that direction, so that's a good step. I don't know if this is specifically the language, but that's something that you would need to do some research on as you do this. So let's start at the beginning again. Anger Management Journal, Stu, Be Less Angry today. No duplication. Yes. Then we have Relevance, and I just talked about Relevance. So anger management, I can imagine, is relevant. Let's give that a try. Do people look for anger management? What do you think? Yes, no, maybe? High popularity, low popularity. Take your bets while Inspector is loading. And I drink some tea. And I've seen Stu on, I've seen this on Twitter a few times, so I think I've looked at it before. Why is it taking so long today? Oh, there was an unexpected error. Oh boy. Let's give this page a reload and see what happens. I love doing all this in real time because every time it breaks... Oh, I'm not logged in. Oh, that's great. I am logged in. Ta-da! Every time I do this in real time and I see errors, I feel like, well, this is what the users are seeing. Oh no, gotta fix this. The product person in me never sleeps. So anger management is a popularity of 30. 30 is good. I like 30. Let's see what else was on there. Anger Management Journal. Anger Management Journal. Not popular enough for people to even look for it on our platform recently. So probably not something to worry about. And I see results starting to come in. Oh yeah, so we have 2 results. Not many people are looking for this, as you can tell. So again, we have something that sounds right. We have something that seems to make sense. But at the end of the day, that's not what people are looking for. So I would take this opportunity and find additional keywords, different keywords that kind of fit the use case a little bit more. So what do people want when they look for anger management? They want to be less angry? Sure. So let's find keywords that kind of follow that path. And that's how I would approach this. And the other thing I see is high ratings average, but not many ratings. So it's super important to try and turn every download into a rating. So if you only get 9 downloads, turn all those into ratings. That would be a good starting point. There's no single app that I've seen that can turn 100% of its downloads into ratings. But the more you can do to work towards it, the better it will be in the long run. So always spend the time to do that. And I was talking to someone yesterday who I don't think is in here today, but he had a tiny change to how he does his ratings. He asked a little bit, not less aggressively or more aggressively, just he thought about it less and actually asked more, which doesn't end up showing the pop-up more. It just ends up showing the pop-up where it's a little bit more relevant, and his ratings jumped 10x overnight. Probably not something that will be sustainable. So he's probably going to see a drop over time. But even after the drop, if he's not going to be at least 4x, I would be very surprised. And that's a very, very, very good thing. So that's something to keep in mind. One more app. Let's see if we can get through one more. Currency. Haha. Funny play on words. New age currency converter. So this is a very, very, very good, something good to look at. So if we go through the list, there's no obvious duplication. There is also, in a way, lacking relevance. So I see an app by the name of Currency. Maybe I'm going to understand what the icon says. Maybe I'm going to understand that this is dollars into yuan, yen, one of those, into a different currency. But ultimately, I may not understand that as I go through if the next app in its name says currency converter, because I'm looking for a currency converter when I do this. Now, the other side of this is focus. So you want to have the most important thing, as I was saying before, in the app's name, but you want to have that in the app's name for a reason, because you want to guide the algorithm towards it. You also want to guide people towards it. Have to keep that in mind. And so here, nothing is really guiding the algorithm. You have currency, which is not a real word. The algorithm, you might want or hope or think or wish that the algorithm will turn this into the word currency because they're so close. And it might, maybe. I doubt it. I know in the US App Store, the algorithm is a little bit more flexible with what it tries to do. And if you think about how full text search algorithms work, they always have a little bit of this. But when the competition is targeting the real keywords, you're never going to see it. And so this to me is a huge mistake. The one keyword that is most important, most relevant, currency converter, is all the way at the end of the subtitle, of all places. I mean, it would have been worse if it was at the end of the keyword list, but let's not go that far. So if, and I know some developers really hate the idea of putting keywords into their app names, but if you think about what your app name looks like when someone searches for it, and let's do this. So let's search for a currency converter in Inspector just to see what it would look like. This is still going. We're going to end its misery. So it is popular, obviously. A nice 55. But look at the top results. Currency converter, currency converter, currency and money transfers. I don't know what the X is for. Unit converter. So you have all these things that are screaming currency converter. And you're competing by saying, I'm not a currency converter, I'm a currency converter. I don't want a currency converter. That's all I'm saying. So I would change the app's name. Oops, next one. I would change the app's name to have currency converter in it. And then I would use this opportunity to also do what we've been saying from the beginning. And that is find other reasons why people would want this. Not other reasons, but find other ways to describe what people would use this for. Convert dollars to yens. Convert X to Y, and use those as your real keywords. This is not a keyword. This is a descriptor for your app. So I would put this in the name. And then what is new age? Is a new age currency converter better than an old age currency converter? Was it smarter? Does it use AI? I don't know. Like you see these things in the way I see it. If you think about it from a user standpoint, they don't really mean much. They're great for when you think about marketing lingo. But we're very limited on keywords here. We're limited by the character. So you want to do what would give you really the most out of this and not just say things. Also, most people don't really read the subtitle, not in search results, because it's either hidden by the developer name or it's tiny. So you have to keep in mind that the app's name is really what is selling your app. So that's this app. Now, I have a few more moments, so let me jump into the chat and let's see what we got on chat. So I am back to full screen. If you have a question, now's a great time to drop it in the chat. So let's see what we have here. With getting rejection on updates. Oh, I should bring this up on screen. Comments do not want to come up on screen. They do. Okay, we got comments on screen. Would getting rejections on updates or releases impact rankings, appearance on the search for that app and for other apps in the same developer accounts? To my knowledge, no, because only what goes live is what the algorithm sees. The algorithm doesn't know of anything else. So I don't think so. Now, there are extreme actions that Apple can take to remove apps, to do things to apps that do things wrong. If you remember the case of Wordle earlier in the year, well, all these apps try to target Wordle with like weird combinations of words that they thought would trick the algorithm into ranking them, and some just pure use the words Wordle. So Apple was able to move those and remove those very quickly. So if Apple's really mad at you, they can probably change your ranks. For all other reasons, I would not expect that to be a case. Another question. We have an app that ranks in the top 15 for the term medications and does not rank well at all for medication. We have the keyword medication in our subtitle. So this is one that I get asked all the time. Not really asked, mostly just people don't understand what's going on in the store. But Apple tries to, or the algorithm tries to depluralize and pluralize things. That's what a full text search engine does. And so I always say only target the singular, not the plural. The problem is when the algorithm sees the keyword in searches, meaning what people type into the text box, it considers both as separate words. And so on the one hand, it indexes off of this logic that cares less about pluralization, but it sees on the input side data that comes in pluralized or in singular form. And so it's always a little bit more difficult. I noticed that in some keywords, the plural is more popular than the singular. In some other cases, that isn't the case. And so it really depends on the particular keyword that you're at. But what I would imagine is that medication and medications, of those two, medication is probably the more popular one and medications is the less popular one. And then because you have medication, you're getting indexed for both of those, but you're based on your performance, so maybe the placement of the keyword, medications is a better target based on what the algorithm sees. So that's what I imagine. It's also, top 15 is nice. I would say if you try and target medications, you might see changes in top 15, maybe into top 10. It's very, very, very dependent on who else is in that category, what they're trying to optimize for, where the keyword is, and a whole bunch of other things. So it's a little hard to say as a high level, just generic kind of statement. But if you see that you're doing a little bit better in medications, I would definitely try and target that specifically and see the impact. It may not have any impact at all. Again, this is really keyword dependent. But if it does, then you got yourself a nice win. And that's good. Ooh, I just saw this follow-up. There is no duplication of the singular or plural in keywords. So that makes sense. And again, that goes back to performance. One quick, easy way to maybe tell what's going on, and I would have done this in Keyword Inspector, but I want to go through more questions before we have to end this, is to look at the competitors on medication versus medications. And if you're not sure what that means, send me an email or hit me up on Twitter, and I'll give you some more thoughts on this, because I've been looking at pluralization for a long time now, and it's definitely an interesting kind of edge case in the way the algorithm handles them. Another question, do characters like amp and plus have an effect, like equalizer versus equalizer plus? They do not have an effect because most people don't search for them, most people don't type them, most people don't really think of doing them unless they're looking for a very specific brand or they saw something somewhere. So I would not optimize for them. But as one of the checks, if you recall, there's a check about, let me bring that back. And let's go here quickly. There is a bug in the algorithm that I found, and I've been looking at this bug for maybe a year now. I wrote about it maybe a month ago or so. There's a bug where if you include things like the ampersand or other characters, even a colon in some cases, or a dash or an EM dash, the algorithm sees them as multiple characters, even though they're one character because of how ASCII works. I can get into the details, but it's too technical. So if you know what I'm talking about, great. If you don't, read this and read the teardown that's associated with this, and you'll see exactly what I mean. If you use them, you have to truncate, or you have to shorten your name a little bit just to make sure that it doesn't get truncated, and then you don't get to rank for the end, for that last keyword in your name. It's pretty silly. I don't know why it's happening. I don't know why it's not fixed. I know why it's happening, but that's something that I saw, and it's hilarious. If you look at enough of these keywords and you see it, you'll see. So let's see what else we have in the chat. A very long question again, so this is definitely truncated. But just a follow-up question on my previous one, my competition has not changed anything, and still you get a drop in keyword rank. Do I still have to keep making changes? It really depends on what you mean by the competition didn't do anything. Do none of the apps in the list, the ones above, the ones below, have made any changes at all? Maybe they changed the keyword list when you weren't looking, or maybe something else happened. Maybe the trend of new ratings changed for them. So there are a lot of different things that can really make this happen. I would say mostly it's important to look at that. And as Frank is saying in the chat, that this ASO checkup process is something that we do internally. So if you are not sure where your ASO is going and you're thinking, I really want to use these tools, but I don't know where to begin, reach out to us. There's a link in the description, also in the chat, and we'll help you with these same checkups. We'll do them for you and show you where you can improve and what we think you should do. It's pretty easy. We really want to make ASO accessible to everyone, so we try to use these as much as possible. And it kind of seems like I ran out of time. So I think now is a good time to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining me. If you like this video, I'm on YouTube, so please give me a like. That really helps, actually. Speaking of algorithms, so I'm learning a lot about the YouTube algorithm in the process. If any of you know a lot about the YouTube algorithm and want to help me, please let me know. I also ask for help. All the tools that you saw today are available, so if you don't have an account yet, go and sign up for one. If you do have an account, go and use it. You can find me on Twitter. Like I said, my Twitter handle is in the description below, and most of you have my email at some point from one of the many emails that I send, so from the newsletter or anything else. So send me an email and ask. I love these sort of questions. I love helping, and I love learning more about how ASO looks across pretty much all the keywords. So that's pretty much it for me. Hopefully in the next live stream, we'll be able to get through even more apps now that I'm getting the rhythm for this. So I'll keep this list going. And in the future, we might do a screenshot teardown, because I think that would be really cool. If you're into that sort of thing, send me an email or let me know, or leave a comment on this video and let me know. Actually, if you have a question after this is done, also leave a comment on the video. I'm remembering this as I'm going along. So that's pretty much it for me. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. And I will see you in 2 weeks for an AF chat with a guest about subscriptions and why people don't buy your subscriptions. It's going to be great. Take care, everyone.